Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalat, wassalam, rasulullah. Welcome to our panel discussion for International Teachers Day, why teachers' wellbeing is important. And I'm joined here by Aisha, all the way from Nigeria, and Ines, after she's finished praying Maghrib, will join us shortly in the room, inshallah, while we tackle this discussion about why is it important to for teachers to look at their own well-being, but also for schools to be concerned about teachers' well-being. So before we get into it, Aisha, I just want to share with them some statistics. There's a survey of over 12,000 teachers, and 85% of the teachers either had signs of burnout or were at risk of burnout. Well, that meant only 15% of teachers were actually doing well. Research has also shown that if teachers are burnt out, that it affects the teaching environment in the classroom. And so you end up with more students demotivated, disengaged. So it affects the behavior in the classroom as well, which also becomes like a domino effect, because as the kids misbehave more and the teacher's already burnt out, it's a vicious cycle. It just gets worse. And so then it costs the schools in terms of teacher retention, because teachers leave the profession because they not having the quality of life and quality of profession. And it also they get sick more often, and so there's extra costs in replacement teachers. So this is actually very much a critical issue that needs to be addressed. And I don't know what it's like over there in Nigeria, Aisha, but here in Australia, we have a shortage of teachers. And so that's adding even more pressure on teachers and pushing them more. So, what is it like in Nigeria in terms of teacher burnout, in terms of teacher well-being? Is it something that's even thought about? Can you share a little about the situation there?
I work in a private school in Nigeria. So, and I know that the school I was in was one that was concerned with teacher well-being, and it's really essential because it's a job, like teaching is a job that has the, what do I say, the potential to ensure complete well-being by itself. Like that's what I've seen. But it's also when it's neglected, then naturally it goes the other way. And so naturally, as you know, as human beings, sometimes we get so caught up in the fast pace of the world, we see it, but then recognize it and come back. On a national level, there's a shortage of people wanting to even teach, because I remember as a primary school student, my teachers seemed content. And that's what I remember from my teachers. They were content. And so we felt emotionally safe with them. There wasn't any feeling. But by secondary school, we could notice then, and I know, like I've always known, the teenagers are difficult, not just for the teenagers themselves, but people dealing with teenagers. And so in secondary school, I remember none of us at all ever aspired to be a teacher, to the frustration of one teacher who asked us. And then the government like had to do something else. So there's a national youth service that is done after a degree in Nigeria before people begin to work. And so because there's a huge shortage of teachers, so people that go through the national youth service are usually deployed to schools to teach. So you can see that like this is a profession that needs well, like really grounded teachers, but because of the shortage of people not wanting to be in that profession for various reasons, the government now has to force people that are, running away from it, like to go there. So, that's a really it's a huge issue here in Nigeria.
If you've got teachers in the classroom who are forced to be there, it's highly unlikely that they're going to come with excitement and passion for their work that will engage the students. It's a very interesting approach to solving the problem. One would have thought that a more proactive way of approaching the problem would be to make the teaching profession one that is paid better, one that is recognized for the importance that it
Yeah.
has, which is we are talking about educating the next generation. It's such a key and important role. And yet, I think historically, teachers have always been one of the lower paid groups. And unrecognized groups in terms of profession. It's not seen as being prestigious to be a teacher, which is very opposite to our, Islamic heritage, where our teachers were revered.
Yeah, and then that reminds me of two countries I look up to. I know that the teachers here who have taught in like in Saudi Arabia, for example, and the students who have gone there to study, like have seen that where teachers are revered. Teachers
Mm.
are revered, and I know that in Finland, when you look at Finland as well, I think
Yeah.
that's where it's also given a lot of importance. But then what comes to it is when I remember the taught us in secondary school, maybe because they are just finished university, they still have that youthful exuberance. So we actually had a nice experience with them. So I guess that's the way of Allah protects, because when you force someone to be somewhere, there's going to be disaster. But because also Allah is looking out for everyone, so at that time their natural exuberance. Then my sister also taught as part of her youth service. She was deployed to a secondary school, and so for her, I know at that time what called to her when she noticed even the condition of the children, because we have these the government schools in some areas where there's a lot of I would say misbehavior. They'd had to have harsh discipline measures. So I remember, like my sister saying, when she went there, she felt like she spoke to the children from the heart. Do you choose to be treated like that? Or can you, or do you, like, are you going to honor yourself and come from that space? And so for that, she has never been a trained teacher, but coming from the heart, she had an amazing experience during her youth service. So as human beings, we keep going, but alhamdulillah, that's the way Allah brings back balance, a wake-up call for us to see how do we participate in that? How do we share the importance, of this all important profession?
Well, I think one of the important things when we're talking about teacher well-being is to understand, why are so many teachers burning out, and looking at, what are the solutions. So some of the key areas that I've come to understand are there's a lot of pressure from leadership for teachers to perform and to get results from the students. Especially here in Australia, we have a website called My Schools, and so there's a lot of competition as to where your school ranks on that website, and so there's a lot of pressure put on. There's also the Australian curriculum, requires so much work, so much teaching, and so that adds a lot on their plate as well. But you were talking about, student behavior. I think that's also a big element of it, because I know when I was doing my teaching prac, when I was studying, to get my teaching qualification, I went in there with this, rose colored glasses on, thinking that I'm going to just stand in front of the class and they're going to listen to me and we're going to do this whole lesson that I planned, only to discover that it doesn't work that way. And so it can be very demoralizing. And I think a lot of teachers, after spending 3-4 years studying to be a teacher, last 1 or 2 years and then leave the profession because it's not what they thought, because they're dealing with kids being off track. So there's multiple areas to this, and much of which as an individual we perhaps have no control over. So I think where the solutions comes in is what we talk about, in our way of looking at it, is teaching with taqwa, tarbiyah, and tawakkul, and being in our wisdom as a teacher when we enter into the classroom. And so, first of all, the one of the positive effects of that is that student engagement. You were just saying that one of the teachers who was doing their youth service, because she taught from her heart, she got great results. So I guess that's what we're talking about. When you go into the classroom as if it's an act of worship, your heart connected to Allah, then there's that opportunity for your heart also to connect with those students, and therefore them be more engaged. And I'd love for you to share, because I remember you sharing with us once before your experience of that, when you were experiencing how that greater connection you had with the students made so much difference.
So I guess what came up for me as you were speaking is about how I've noticed that children seem to be a barometer of how our community or society is doing. Because what I've noticed in the school is that whenever children were doing well, like you could see, or doing well apparently, like you could see that the family like is doing well. But whenever children begin to struggle, one of the first things we check is with parents about what's happening, whether there's a transition, a move, a new child born into the house, a death in the family, or any other thing, or lots of transitions. And usually when we check with a child that's not doing well, there's always sure something to be happening. And so when we work together with the parents and we work collectively, then we begin to see the child doing well. And in so many instances, there have been times where I've worked with a school psychologist, and at some point she will say the child is actually well, they just needed a few sessions. But what we see is that the parents need help. And so it was a big eye opener for me. And so like alhamdulillah, so teachers, so when there's teacher well-being and when there's parental well-being, you see it in the children. And when there isn't, one of the first places you see it again is with the children. So you
Mm.
know it's, yeah.
That's a really important point. And welcome, Anas. So we're at the point in the conversation where we're talking about how the a teacher's well-being is really important to the connection with the students, and when there's that connection there, how the behavior of the students becomes on track. Because we were talking originally also how student behavior is also one of the reasons why teachers burn out, so it's sort of like a vicious circle, but it can start with us. So I know, because you have that Montessori approach, that this definitely fits with what what you teach in Montessori. So can you share something of what you've witnessed in the difference in children when the teachers themselves are doing well and on
Yeah.
and very connected when they join the classroom?
Yeah, well, subhanAllah, Montessori actually has a whole concept of the spiritual transformation of the teacher. And I might have mentioned it to you before. I feel that the Back to the Fitrah, the work that we do in Back to the Fitrah is actually that missing link, because when I was studying Montessori, I was like, that sounds really good, but how do you do it? And, just having that inside out paradigm is a wonderful way. And for her, that, for Montessori and the teachings of Montessori, that's paramount, that the teacher herself or himself are calm, authentic, they're in touch with their own emotions, and that then translates into the classroom. There was a beautiful quote by an educator who said, I'm the climate. I create the climate in the classroom.
Mm.
And we really witnessed that in Egypt, because Egypt used to, traditionally was type of rote learning environment. And, in that environment, children who are slow, they fall behind. It's all aimed at the middle group. The ones who pick it up quickly get bored, and they get like a bit restless in the classroom. They might be cheeky. And then the teacher, over there, yelling and things was a very normal thing in the classrooms, which I've witnessed. And subhanAllah, when we introduced Montessori education for the first time in an Egyptian school, it was just so heartwarming to walk past, because I was looking after a number of classrooms, and I'd walk past or walk in, I'd find every single child engaged calmly. The teachers were calm, it was so heartwarming, and especially since, you know, they used to tell me, oh, this isn't going to work with Egyptian children. You know, they're too rowdy, you know, this might work with, you know, Western children, but no, but it did, it worked, you know, it's got no race, it's got no ethnicity. It's when the teacher is calm, you know, the whole classroom is calm. And it's not just about the teacher being calm, it's about the environment being prepared for the child. I mean, you know, how's the child going to be engaged if there's nothing being offered for the child, you know? And unfortunately, the regular way of teaching is like everyone has to be doing the same thing at the same time, which doesn't really work. You know, it doesn't really actually cater to everyone, because everyone has different needs at different times. And having the environment set up with different activities for the different children and their different needs, and empowering them to do things independently, and then the teacher can concentrate on helping different children when they need it. It really works well, alhamdulillah.
So what I heard from what you said, Inas, is it's working both ways that way. The first thing was you said about the condition of the teacher when they come into the realm of teaching, into the classroom, but also by having the environment set up to cater for the kids, you've got that balance of, well, now the teacher has the ability to focus on what they need to, because the students are engaged, they're not having to deal with all the behavior management. So I think what we're definitely seeing through the discussion, or the thread of the discussion, is teacher wellbeing and student wellbeing, they go together so much. If you've got a teacher off track, you're going to end up with the kids off track. If you've got the kids off track and a teacher that's, you know, not resourced to bring them back on track, then you're going to have the teacher go off track too. So
Yeah.
the well-being of our educators is so very important, because it empowers them. If they're spiritually, emotionally, physically doing well, then they're going to be able to invite those children into the world of learning. What we say, leading learning instead of
Well,
teaching.
that's right. I love what you just
Yeah.
said, invite. And
Yes.
that's another concept in Montessori education. You invite the child. If they're not ready for that particular activity, then, you know, maybe you invite them again, and you know, but it's not forcing it, you know. Yeah, I like that.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Alhamdulillah.
alhamdulillah. And you know, what came back to mind now is maybe like the schools I have worked in, how so deep they were in the emotional well-being of the teachers. So it didn't readily come to mind, like when you were saying. So because there is that constant like check to ensure that teachers are teaching from a place of well-being. So we do pick up like a few things, because you notice even simply when a teacher is disorganized or moving about like in a disorganized, it affects the classroom, it affects the children. And so part of the important like the well-being of the children is there also the well-being at home. So we call it a partnership, because everyone is a stakeholder. So when the teachers are in a good place, there's that invitation to the children, or recognizing that the children are on their Fitrah. When the teachers are in a state of well-being, there is no blame. It doesn't come from a place of blame, saying, oh no, it's the child, no, it's their parent. There are times where we've had that, no, it's the way they have been, just because, and just the way you said about people saying it won't work with Egyptian children, like because they are rowdy. So even here, there sometimes is, no, when you treat children too gently, this is not you know, it's a Western concept. They need discipline. So when we go from this where teachers are grounded, the children are well, and then the teachers also advocate for the children even within their families.
So one of the things that we focus on at Back to the Future, as Ines was talking about, is that spiritual approach, that spiritual growth. And that's why we call our program Teaching with Taqwa, Tarbiyah, and Tawakkul, our three T's. Because what we see is, from that space, the tawakkul means that there's the calm, right? That they can come into the classroom knowing everything will be okay. the tarbiyah means they can come into the classroom in a compassionate state for their learners and accept them for who they are and what state and condition they're in when they arrive in the room. And the taqwa being that they're confident that they're there as an act of worship, that they're there to please Allah, and they're conscious of Allah in the way they are handling the classroom. And this brings about, a really beautiful atmosphere in the classroom. When surveyed, students said, they want teachers to take charge. They don't want to just have free rein in the classroom, but they want teachers to take charge in a confident and compassionate manner, and that they want teachers to be friendly and available and easy to talk to. And the relationship with their teachers is incredibly important. And so what I see, and I would love each of you to share your thoughts, is that with this understanding, it gives us the ability to have well-being, not just spiritually, because when we're in that state, we also have wisdom over how we're doing physically and emotionally as well. And from that wisdom, we can make sure that we're looking after ourselves, taking care of ourselves, taking the action that's needed, so that when we walk into the classroom, we're going to be the best version we can be. But also, we can still have a good quality life as well. We're not burnt out in the classroom, so that we then come home and we're no good to anyone. So I'd love for you to both share from understanding the work we do, how you see that benefits in the classroom.
Yeah, yeah, I had I got burnt out, early, maybe a few years ago, maybe about 10 years ago, like somewhere there about. And even before the burnout, I was going through, a master's program, like with education. And so it was called Teaching Self-Regulation. So teaching self-regulation, all the time management and, everything else came into it. So when we did an activity about, what's on your plate, and as soon as the facilitator took a look at it, he said, if you don't take care of yourself, everyone you care about is not going to be taken care of. And it was, it was strange to me because, I know that I cared about my family, I cared about my students. And so I was putting everything of myself into it, exhausting myself. And not long after, I actually got burnt out. And so with the burnout, I had to take a long break even from the school. And so coming back to live a life of balance. And when I talk about the barometer earlier, like what I was thinking about was that if the world is going at such a fast pace, the children are on their Fitrah. And so they teach us to slow down. They teach us to slow down and be in the moment. And so when we care about them and then we see we can't serve them, so it in different ways Allah calls to us, to maintain that balance. And so that's where the emotional well-being and
Jazakallah khair for sharing that. It goes to show, even when we're really super excited and passionate about our work, we still have to be aware of burning ourselves out. Alhamdulillah. And Ines, I know you've struggled at times with getting run down with all the pressures in the work environment. You're welcome to share that, or just to share what you've witnessed over the years, because Ines has been quite involved in the first Montessori school in Egypt, and also very much involved with a school that her father opened up. It was 30 years ago or 31 years ago now.
Yeah, maybe.
In Australia.
31 years now, yeah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So she's been around the circuits quite a lot.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, there's something that when you were talking, Kathryn, before, it reminded me of a beautiful concept too in Dr. Montessori's writings, and it's about obedience. And it's not like the child, you want to gain their what you call voluntary obedience, that they want to obey you because they love you and they respect you. And when you're authentic and when you're grounded, that's going to happen. But when you try and force it, that might not happen. They might not want to follow and obey what you do. But once you have that relationship with them, then they will happily want to follow and want to please you as a teacher, just like with parents, or what our relationship with Allah should be. We want to obey Allah, please Allah, because we love Allah, not because someone's got a stick over us or threatening us that we're going to lose playtime or lunchtime, whatever, of detention. It's out of a relationship of love. And only when we can be compassionate to ourselves first, because when we're giving from an empty cup, we got nothing to give anymore.
Absolutely. So before we wrap it up, I just want to share with those who are watching that I've put the link in the chat, but also put it on the screen, that we've got a audit that teachers can do to see whether they're showing symptoms or signs of burnout. So it's a self-assessment that you can do to just see where you're at in terms of burnout. So if anyone's been listening and now you're concerned whether you yourself are showing signs of burnout, this is something that you can do to assess.
I wish I knew that before.
Sorry.
Yeah, I wish someone pointed me in that direction before, because I think as women, we tend to do that. We tend to want to give everything to everyone and put ourselves last. And Aisha experienced burnout. I've experienced burnout, and because we're not just a teacher or just a mother, we're a mother, a daughter, a sister, a carer, some at work. We're an employee, we're a teacher, we're a colleague, and often we want to give everything to everyone, and then put ourselves last on the list, even if we're on the list at all. And also the relationships, in all of these contexts, we might be having difficult relationships. And the work of Back to the Fitrah really helps that, just all the weight of that is, alhamdulillah, it just sort of falls off. And that stress of difficult relationships really isn't such a stress anymore. So that's a load off the shoulders, which helps, which would help avoid the burnout as well.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair for sharing that, Nas. You were trying to say something.
Yeah, when I had the burnout, so when I was reading up on it, like what it said was that if you reach that stage of burnout, then you will never recover fully. And that was what I believed then. So it's more like I believed I was already broken, like my memory, because one of the first things I noticed affected was my memory. So coming back to the Fitrah, the understanding that we're never broken, because we're never broken, we only think we were. And I see that again. So, and what it was before was, I guess there was the over-reliance on the intellect. So now knowing that actually that is not the only intelligence we have, but our main intelligence is the wisdom of connecting to Allah and, letting the wisdom of Allah pass through us. So this has been helpful a lot in my healing and like my continuous healing journey. So I got burnt out, but there's always hope, like of coming back, no matter what, I guess human-based knowledge says. There's always hope. There's always a way.
Alhamdulillah. That's such a beautiful place to bring it all together, actually. MashaAllah. Thank you, Aisha, for sharing the fact that there's always hope. I hope that those who've been listening have appreciated how important it is to look after ourselves as educators, the impact it has on our students if we don't, the vicious cycle we can get ourselves into if we do start having those signs of burnout. But there's always hope. And I really invite anyone who is an educator who's been listening to take advantage of our audit to just do a bit of an assessment, because you might be surprised. There's things on there like whether you're able to have a good night's sleep, because that's also can be an indicator of burnout, because it affects you in so many different areas of your life. So on the audit, there's a whole range of areas where you can assess yourself and see how you're doing. Jazakallah khair, Aisha and Ines, for your time this evening, and to all the teachers out there, keep doing the amazing work that you're doing, and understand the importance of the work that you're doing. Just because it's a profession that isn't put on a pedestal like other professions doesn't mean that it isn't important. It's an incredibly important role, educating the next generation, and the impact that we have on our learners can really make and break their life. I've seen it with my own kids. A good teacher and they thrive, a not so good teacher and they struggle. And it's that simple. So let's all be aware of our well-being, take care of our well-being, so that we can take care of our learners, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.